All right, everybody, welcome to the American Regulars podcast. This is episode number 29, and this is the presidential debate reaction episode. Not obviously of Trump and Biden, but Trump and Harris. As always, I'm JD Walter. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at reg_American1. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, American Regulars Podcast. And if you want to get a hold of me, contact me, email me at AmericanRegularsPodcast@gmail.com. And I was excited for this one. Wanted to get it last night. My last couple days have been crazy. So I'm reviewing this debate on Thursday night, right? Right now, it's currently Thursday night. I got my drink in front of me. I've got my notes in front of me. And for all the work I did, this might be a little bit of a freestyle episode. Also got some really good stuff to talk about at the end. Bright side, good news. Coming up after the election debate reaction. And I must have taken I got 7 pages of notes. I just sat there. I had myself a scotch, and I just typed away, basically writing down bullet points and what I thought about the election debate as it was going on. And looking back, I don't know if that was the best thing, because I'm a little inside baseball on a lot of politics. And debates really aren't about substance. A lot of times, it seems like the debates are primarily emotional, right? It's more of a pathos, right, than a logos reaction. Feelings over thoughts. And when you sit there and you're listening for everything and correcting, if you want to sit there and listen, and I don't care if it's Kamala or Trump, and you want to sit there and see if they're telling you the truth or not, or if they're providing substance or not, it's a long night, and it keeps you busy typing, and you shake your head a lot. And that is not what's moving the needle with the public, when I think in general, when you're watching these debates, when you're listening to these debates, I think it's more about tempo and feel. Like I said, it's very pathological. It's very much about how people are feeling. And before I get into individual things, they covered a large range of topics, and I'm having a hard time thinking of an answer that I really, really liked. I think there were some things that I think Kamala won, and I think there's some things Trump, I go, oh, he sounded better on. But nothing that I really fully just was like, that's exactly what you needed to say. So I think we'll just go with my initial reactions, my overview on what happened, and then after that fact, then I'll break down little certain parts where I thought maybe Trump did good, maybe Trump did bad, and the same for Kamala. And I will tell you my bias from the start. I'm a Ron Paul libertarian, which means neither of these people will receive my vote. I've said that previously. I maintain it today. And honestly, my main takeaway from this is the Democrats deserve to lose so bad. That isn't my takeaway from the debate. That was my takeaway from these last 4 years, particularly under COVID, particularly under the way they've been flirting with international disastrous foreign policy that could lead to World War III. Those two things have just made me think no one deserves to lose more than the Democrats. And then you listen to Donald Trump at the debate, and it really, I mean, he had it T-balled up against Biden, right? Donald Trump can outperform a senile old man pretty handily. And you go, wow, we need him. Kamala did fairly well. She wasn't particularly enlightening. She's light on substance, though I've heard from other people saying they thought she sounded like she had more substance than Trump. I wouldn't argue that there was a huge degree of severity between those two, but I think it was a lot more than Biden had. And listening to Trump at this debate really just helped me remember that, look, as much as I want the Democrats to lose, Donald Trump doesn't deserve to win. And he had some moments that I thought were good and I thought maybe were important. There's been points in his campaign. I was pretty excited, if you would have listened, him bringing on RFK Jr., him getting the endorsement of Tulsi Gabbard. These things aren't a bad instinct. And then it kind of leads not to the fact that Trump's good, but that a guy who is cerebral, an intelligent man like RFK Jr., realizes how bad the Democrats deserve to lose. And the same for Tulsi Gabbard. She was the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. I think after this debate, it kind of reminds me that was more substantial as a referendum against the Democratic Party than it really was an endorsement of Trump. And they might not say that for political purposes, but I think in general they would agree with me on that. In terms of who I thought won the overall debate, I think it was Kamala. I don't think you can... I think maybe originally I thought it was closer to a wash. And like I said, I have this bias because I think the Democrats deserve to lose so bad, even though I don't like Trump. But debates are not a game scored without handicaps. Like in golf, you get a handicap. It's not a football game where it's like most points at the end win. Like, each candidate had different goals. I think Trump's goal for this debate, and maybe I should have done a preview, and in full transparency, I might be somewhat influenced by, I don't remember specifically stuff that I'm going to bring up, but I did listen to the debate recap by Dave Smith and Robbie Bernstein yesterday. I thought it was good as always. They made some great points. At some point, I might wander into one, and I'll try to give them credit if I take something from them. But Trump needed to show that he was strong, not against Biden, but Kamala. And I think they were maybe Republicans and people rooting for Trump were more or less hoping that Kamala would be a terrible debater. What we constantly heard and what we saw in 2020 was that she wasn't a great debater. I don't think she's a great orator. I don't think she's a person of principle or moral fiber. But she answered questions and she said it. I mean, it's the annoying political stuff that I just despise. But that's everybody. I think she knew how to answer stuff. And I think that the Democratic Party, I think Kamala's people, had a better game plan than Donald Trump. I'll say this too. The hosts sucked. We know the hosts were going to suck. They were ABC. They were biased. I think I saw Patrick Bet-David. I think I saw someone else. I think someone said that they interrupted Trump and corrected him 11 times. I think someone else said 19 times. And like Kamala, 0. And to what I remember, they never corrected her. And she did have her fair share of misinformation or disinformation. So Trump did have it against him. But it was an ABC debate. We know that was going to happen. If Trump didn't realize that, then all this talk of his political instincts is ill-informed. Right? Trump didn't do what he needed to do. And Kamala didn't have to do much. That's just the way the whole thing was set up. And when I say Trump didn't do what he needed to do, I think Trump buried himself a little bit, honestly. And when I say buried, I mean in terms of the debate. I don't know how much it will affect him in the long run. If you like Trump, I mean, I don't care what he did. What is a Trump supporter? What's it going to take for your average Trump supporter to flip to Kamala, or to just not vote from a debate? What would you have to see happen on that debate stage? It's not going to happen. And vice versa. Show me a world where Kamala has the worst debate ever, right? People still would have voted for Joe Biden. They got worried because they knew the independents. After Joe Biden's terrible debate performance, they got worried that the independents would just go to Trump because they said, hey, we have to have a president that can tie his shoes in the White House. So they were happy to replace Biden, but they wouldn't have voted no matter how bad Biden did on that first debate, and it was historically bad. None of the Biden supporters were going to say, okay, I'm voting for Trump now. They got him out for the independence shift. So this debate will only move the needle with the independents, which is a small amount. And I'm not sure how much. That remains to be seen. I think it's also interesting that this might be the only debate between them. But Kamala had in her game plan, I think the biggest thing was Trump came off too angry and too defensive. And it's somewhat understandable. The hosts were biased. The host tried to correct him a dozen or more times. They had pointed questions. At one point, the guy, I should really start looking up moderators' names. The man moderator just interjected and was like, they were asking about if Trump had ever, if he would concede that he lost 2020. He goes, no, I didn't lose 2020. He goes, well, one time you did. You said by a whisker. He goes, I was being sarcastic. And then the guy goes, for the record, you didn't sound sarcastic to me. So at that point, it was literally, he was debating Trump. The moderator's debating Trump. He was giving his own opinion on Trump on something that is subjective. Sarcasm's subjective. Someone's being sarcastic or not, but believe me, I have a wife. I'm sarcastic sometimes, and it's not received as sarcastic. And to be honest, I'm sarcastic with a lot of people. And sometimes it flies, and sometimes it's not recognized. But it's a subjective thing to recognize it. You guys have had text messages where you've got confused on that. It's subjective. So when he's arguing the subjective point against Trump, I think that really showed the bias. But okay. So it was bias, and that makes Trump angry. And Trump came off as angry. And it was a prolonged anger. I think there's times in a debate where your goal is to sound poised, poignant, direct, assertive, right? That's all good. Sound like you have confidence. Stay on that nice, even kill because you want to present yourself as composed. If you're not composed, well, then it comes off as either nervous or anxious or some other undesirable thing that might indicate how you personally think you're doing in the debate. If you always seem composed, if you always seem like you have it all together, you speak nice and slow, nice and calm, no big deal, look relaxed, it looks good. It's the guy that they get in a brawl in the UFC, and they're just scrapping. And then the bell pops up, and instead of grabbing your eye and limping back to the corner and putting your hands on the fence, you pop up like you've been there a million times, you scratch your ass, you walk over there like, I don't know, like you're going to get a cup of coffee. You try to make it look like it's no big deal because in your mind, that might influence the judges in that fight. Now, Trump got mad. Maybe it was because he kept taking Kamala's bait and she would make fun of his crowd sizes. Or she would call him a tyrant. Or she would call him too weak to confront Putin or whatever. Or he inherited his dad's money and went bankrupt 6 times. And she would put this out there and Trump couldn't lay off. And he knew that the moderators weren't going to fact check her, which I don't know if that stuff I think is true. But he knew he was on his own. If he says something wrong, moderators are going to fact check him. Kamala says something, he goes, well, I got to defend myself. No one else will come to me. I'm all on my own. And so he would interject, sometimes cutting off the moderators, and then he would be angry and he would argue. And he wasn't yelling, but you could tell he had a lot of aggression in it. And you can't maintain that for an hour and a half debate. If you are angry and have an elevated voice for an hour and a half, you come off as disturbed. You need to kind of, it's like a rock song or some sort of music. If it's hard the entire time, it never really kicks in. But if you can do something nice, like think of a rock song that just has this nice slow build up, right? Really slow, mellow, and it starts to climax, or whatever. And then all of a sudden the refrain drops, and then it hits hard, and then that part of the song is that much better. There's sort of a rhythm or a melody, or I don't know music, you can tell by now, but there's something to that in the debate. You can't just redline for an hour and a half. It's going to come off wrong. What you do is you pick your one topic. You pick your two topics that you really want to drive home. And then when you get fired up, and then when you raise your voice, if you do it in that manner, now your anger has more of an impact. And now it's perceived as passion and fervor instead of some sort of disturbance or some sort of distemperament or whatever. It's like, oh, he's not rabid. He just cares a lot. And I don't think Trump did a good job in terms of his appearance and his demeanor in that. I think he was too hot for too long. Kamala wasn't exciting. Kamala wasn't charismatic. I don't think she can be. But Kamala stayed pretty even kill, and I think it read better. And I particularly think that after talking to other people. I kind of got other people's opinions because, like I said, I was in the weeds. I'm writing 7 pages of notes on what's true, what's not, where they got stuff wrong. And then going back and listening, I think that's the perception problem for Trump. That is my general takeaway of kind of the feeling, the ambiance, the emotional reaction, which I think is probably sadly, I suppose, probably of more import than substance. And I don't say sadly for Trump because Trump had plenty of bad substance this night as well. But we know Kamala's substance is terrible. And so, I think a lot of people were very excited. Tulsi destroyed Kamala, ended her debate, and Trump's bringing her in. And I don't know to what extent Tulsi, what kind of knowledge she imparted on Trump. Maybe she gave him, hey, here's a really good zinger. Here's a really good one-liner. Trump had some funny one-liners. He had more memorable funny one-liners than Kamala. He said, go wake your President Biden up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to have him sign something into law. That was funny. He talked about how she had no plan. He doesn't say it clearly. He doesn't say, hey, there's no platform on your website. He says, oh, it's like 4 words. It's like see, spot, run. That's your plan. It's funny, but he doesn't set up the punchline. See, spot, run as a plan's a good punchline, but he doesn't set up the fact that, look, yeah, you have no policy. You haven't spoken upon it. You did an 18-minute interview with your vice president there, and half the time it wasn't on policy. He doesn't build up. He has the good one-liner, but he doesn't really deliver it with enough stuff in front of it for it to hit home. Instead, whatever Tulsi did instruct him on, Tulsi Gabbard is not able to instruct Trump to not be Trump. And there's some good things that Trump does on the debate stage that makes the one-liners or the attitudes sometimes. But he didn't hit well tonight. He had the worst attributes of Trump on full display. He looked arrogant and brash, and he rambled. And I think Kamala, for all of her lack of charm or substance, capitalized on that. All right, let's get into my notes. I tried to delete some of them. I tried to highlight it so we're not here all night. But I'm going to run down some of these things and just go over things I thought were noteworthy. And maybe they did make an impact on independents, especially people who are maybe paying more attention. And again, some of these will be for Kamala, some of these will be for Trump. It started out on the economy, and they don't get into it, and they never talk about the Federal Reserve to address actual inflation. Right away in the debate, Trump starts talking about his tariffs. I think he was asked on them, but he's talking about how they won't cause higher prices, which is just categorically false. And anyone who knows anything about economics knows that this is a baseless claim of Trump. Now, he does bring up inflation, which he should, because it's caused higher prices. But when you preface that with your own terrible plan on the economy, it really, like inflation is such a golden goose for Trump. And to brag about tariffs, it's just, he's just chopping the legs out from underneath his campaign. You have them dead to rights on higher prices and people feeling it, and everyone knows about inflation. And he's like, and I got an answer for it. And it's really, really dumb. So he started off very bad. From there, they went to abortion. And you saw a lot of moderator bias there. There was a lot of asking on Roe v. Wade. And I don't think Trump I think Kamala came out on top of this. I don't think his initial instinct was bad. He was saying, hey, Roe v. Wade, bringing it to the states isn't radical. 8th and 9th month abortions, that's radical. She asked if he would sign on a national, federal abortion ban, and he deflects. He says, well, I won't have to. And that's not bad, but it is dodging the question, and the hosts allow it on that. And then he asks, what exceptions for you, Kamala? Like, would you support 9-month abortions? And he brings up, I thought it was wild. For as bad as the moderators did, when he brings up the governor of Virginia who talked about having a baby on the table, made comfortable, while the doctor and the mother made a decision. And, like, it is not even acknowledged by the moderators. That seems pretty wild. And I get the governor of Virginia is not running, but the policies that it seems that Kamala's for, she didn't answer if she had any stances on 8th, 9th month, late-term abortions, and she wasn't asked by the moderators to do it. He asked her, she didn't ask, she just deferred back with her own question on the federal abortion ban. He also mentioned that Walz had the same stance as the governor of Virginia. I haven't looked that up. I should have. If that's true, that is a wild stance to have. And if J.D. Vance doesn't bring that up on a vice presidential debate, then I don't know what they're doing. Because, I mean, even the most pro-life people have to view that as just obscene. Or, excuse me, pro-choice people have to view that as obscene. So, I thought that was maybe the most biased that the moderators seemed that night. And like I said, the moderators asked a lot of questions. They would defer. They would, during it, they said, by the way. So he asked that question. And they go, by the way, this was their fact check. They said, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a baby to term and asking for an abortion. Oh, Kamala said that. The hosts say, hey, it is illegal. By the way, it's not legal in any state to kill a baby after it's born. They say something to that extent, which is, yes, obviously. Now, here's the thing. Trump didn't say that. Trump said the governor of Virginia supported that, and he said Walz supported it, right? I could say, if I was in a debate with someone, let's say I'm on the left, and I say, this guy wants, let's say a leftist is debating me, and they go, this guy wants citizens to be able to own machine guns without a license. And then the moderator says, no, that's false. Nowhere in the U.S. is it legal for a citizen to have a machine gun without a license. Well, okay, maybe it's not legal. But that's not what the Democrat or the lefty would have been saying. They would have been saying, it is my opposition's view that they want this to be legal. There's a very big discrepancy there. And so to frame it, it was like framing a pitch on a baseball, right? High ball, and then they just bring it in and change it into something else and try to convince the judge or the umpire that it's a strike. I thought that was a very dishonest fact check by the host. Immigration. Trump drops the ball. That's his strength. He can talk about the changes in culture. He brings up crime a lot, and I know a lot of people refute that crime is going down all the time. Even if crime's going down, that doesn't necessarily mean that immigration isn't adversely affecting crime. It could be that the natural-born citizens and then the citizens of the U.S. are just outpacing their lack of crime to the influx of crime calls. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying it's not one or the other, but I've seen a lot of articles saying, hey, despite immigration, crime's going down. That doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, crime is important, but there's other reasons that you can not like immigration, welfare state, jobs. Trump brings up that they're taking black and Hispanic jobs. You could argue culturally, right, that it will lead to more political and cultural division within the United States, which we're already swamped with. But he doesn't do that. He brings up Haitians in Ohio eating pets. I don't know if he said Haitians, but we've seen the memes, right? And what happens is I feel like the Democrats really might have just said, let's flood Twitter with Haitians eating pets because Trump might take this bait, and he did. And Kamala gives this big, silly laugh, like, I can't believe he's bringing this up. And look, fact check me on this. If I'm wrong, email me. I've done a little research, but it was like, I'm scrolling through Twitter research. I'm not writing a peer-reviewed study on it. I think there's pictures of Haitians eating geese in Ohio. Geese, by the way, is the worst meat I've ever had. I've ate a lot of meat. I've had deer, elk, pronghorn. Oh, I haven't had pronghorn. Deer, elk, bear, cow, pig, squid, whatever. I've ate a lot of meat. Rabbit. The only meat I ever remember spitting out was goose jerky. It was terrible. So these Haitians, I don't know. But there was pictures of Haitians eating goose jerky, walking around with dead geese in their hands. They're like killing geese at the park to eat them. And then there's a black lady in Springfield, Ohio, that apparently like killed, mutilated, and started eating someone's cat on their driveway. I saw the video. She never, I've heard reports, and I saw Dwight Schrute, the real Dwight Schrute, not the actual character, talk about how it was an American citizen, not a Haitian. I never heard them speak, so I couldn't tell. But say they're American. So there's this really weird situation of someone eating someone's cat in Ohio. Simultaneously, we get pictures of Haitians walking around with park geese that they've killed to eat, which I don't have a problem. Eat a goose. I don't know how they went about it. Like if they were just chasing them around by the playground at the pond or whatever, and they just start beating these geese to death. But whatever. They're eating geese. Sounds like they're weirder. And there is misinformation to it. I think they showed some guy from the Congo or Ghana or somewhere in Africa killing a cat in an alley. They're like, this is in Ohio. And you look, the buildings are made of cinder blocks and like old pieces of tin on the roof. I was like, I don't think that's Ohio. Anyhow, it was a distraction. Trump should have just focused on all the problems with immigration and not brought up Haitians eating pets, because most people don't know what that is. What it is a hilarious meme. There's tons of great memes on it. But it was a diversion. And whatever good point he was making, it just made people cross their eyes and say, what the hell? People are eating pets in Ohio? And now they're not even listening to you if you're making a good point. Kamala bragged on, one thing that I thought for Trump, Kamala bragged on 200 Republican endorsements for her. And I said earlier, I thought Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. were good endorsements for Trump because it kind of shows how sick they are of the Democrats. But in my mind, they are, and I thought this way before they ever endorsed Trump, and honestly, endorsing Trump doesn't help him in this regard. I thought they were both undoubtedly, they're smarter than, I would say, your average politician. I also think they have more principles. They were always people from the left that I kind of admired, or at least respected. Kamala's 200 Republican endorsements, I don't know who they all are. I know one's Mitt Romney, which doesn't do a whole hell of a lot for me. But in this debate, for Kamala Harris, she not only bragged about the endorsement of Liz Cheney, who sucks, but the left likes her. That's like the likable left Republican. She also bragged about her endorsement from Dick Cheney, a.k.a. what, King Neocon? Like, I mean, just the worst type of man. I mean, how many deaths are at least somewhat shouldered by Dick Cheney? He helped lie us into wars, to kill people on the other side of the globe, wreck our economy. I mean, there's no one. If Dick Cheney told me I made good brisket, I'd never cook the thing again. Like, there's not a worse reference. There's not a worse endorsement in the world in my mind. Who would I rather have endorse me than Dick Cheney? Damn near about everybody. And then she later goes on to, I don't remember the exact thing, but she says the late, great John McCain, who took pictures with, what were they called, the Northern Storm? Like, with ISIS, and was like looking for, he was up in Ukraine talking about wanting to go to war there. He wanted wars, bomb Iran. Like, it was a war hawk. War hero turned war hawk turned war criminal, John McCain. And she's celebrating Dick Cheney and John McCain. Unbelievable. And the only other thing that's sickening is for her doing, in my opinion, she's done better than Donald Trump in this debate. And she's bringing up Dick Cheney and John McCain to be on her side. She's on that side with those angels. Man, that ought to put a pit in the stomach of every Democrat that votes for her. And I get not voting for Trump. I'm not voting for Trump. But holy shit. Democrats, unless you're so young you don't remember it, anyone my age who said, hey, and then the Democrats will brag about the endorsements of John McCain and Dick Cheney. It's a jaw-dropping moment, and it's disgusting, and it really shows you just how short-term memoried and dumb the American voting bloc can be. Gross. Trump, she talked about how many people didn't like Trump. He had a nice line when he said that he fired most of those people, when she's talking about generals and the Secretary of, the State Department and the NSA. She's like, oh, they don't even like him. He's like, yeah, I fired him. You guys ruined Afghanistan. You didn't fire anybody. I did think that was a pretty good job on Trump for the foreign policy part. I thought he was better on Ukraine. He certainly wasn't good. He bragged about stuff. He talks about how he'll fix Ukraine, doesn't say it. It's great that he wants to end the war. They asked if he would supporting a Ukrainian win. He's like, I just want the war to end. That's the best thing I heard all night. He's like, we're getting close to World War III. We can't have World War III. The war needs to end. People are dying. That's great. When they ask him how he's going to do it, or he doesn't say how he's going to do it, he just says, oh, I'll do it on day one. Okay. Yeah, it'd be nice to know the plan. But, yeah, stopping that war, stopping the potential for NATO and U.S. direct involvement with Russia, which would result in World War III, that was the best thing I heard all night from either. That being said, he then, before that, bragged about things he did, which basically helped bring him up to the edge. He helped arm Ukraine. He bragged about the Nord Stream pipeline. He bragged about, just all sorts of stuff that made no sense. And Trump also, when he got angry, they gave him a leash. I wondered sometimes if they were letting his timer run long because, look, I'm at 30-some minutes on this podcast right now. I've been talking the whole time. I know how to ramble. That's what a podcast is. Trump would ramble into such incoherency. At one point during climate change, he's saying, look, she's going to get rid of the oil. She's going to go after wind. She's going to go after solar. Solar will make a big old desert. You take the whole desert, you put nothing but solar plants there. And by the way, I like solar. And he basically ran out of time while he was waffling back and forth between how bad solar panels were and how much he liked solar. Like, Kamala's a flip-flopper, and Trump tried to convey that. And at the same time, he would flip-flop in the same sentence. It was a really poor showing by him. They brought up January 6th. Kamala said that he said there was fine people on both sides. She called the Proud Boys a militia, which they're not. And mentioned that Trump said that there would be a bloodbath, which he was talking about economic policies with like the auto industry, and never got fact-checked by the host. They just let her run away with that. That was another blatant thing that the host did wrong. Trump does interject, and he says, hey, the bloodbath, that was about energy, which is great. And then he goes, and the Charlottesville thing was debunked, which is true. Good. He has to debunk because the host won't. And he should have just shut up there. Instead of saying the Charlottesville thing was debunked, he could have said it was debunked by Snopes. He should have been said, it's on camera, look it up, it's a blatant lie. Instead he goes, it was debunked by Sean Hannity. It's like, well, shit. Now everyone's just going to assume like the most biased, in the tank, annoying person on Fox News debunked it. Like, that doesn't do anything for an independent, let alone a Democrat. That was it. Why did you have to say he was the one that did it? Why didn't you say someone that doesn't suck debunked it? Because there's plenty of people that debunked it. Yeah, I already talked. The hosts, they messed up. Israel and Hamas, they were both awful. Trump again rambled. She hates Israel. She loves Israel. She hates Palestine. She loves the Palestinians. And look, Kamala said nothing good, but she did stay in the pocket, and she just said, what? Israel, we need a two-state solution. Israel has the right to defend itself. On the other hand, too many Palestinians have died, and we need to negotiate. No plans. She basically just said, like a 5th grade book report on it. The most vague stuff ever. But it sounds better than Trump rambling and saying more, but it still comes off as more incoherent. He talked about Iran and how, they got money now, but he doesn't say, which, look, I think Iran should have got the money, but he doesn't say, how did Iran get money? He just says stuff from the top of his mind, and he doesn't front load it or tell people what the hell he's talking about because he's only got 2 minutes and he has a whole bunch of shit to ramble on about. So he doesn't talk about how was Obama unfreezed Iranian assets that were theirs, or cash. Maybe it wasn't assets, maybe it was just cash, and they gave it back to him for the, was it like a nuclear deal, which is one of the best things Obama did. But instead, he just goes, now Iran, now they have money. He mentions the Houthis in Yemen. It seems like he is aware of more things than Kamala, but doesn't know how to express them or what they're really about. I would say we saw that a lot, and I don't think he was good enough at explaining them or having workable policies for them to sound good. Where Kamala kind of just sat there and threw slow fastballs down the middle of predictable and boring and unsubstantial, and I think it overall worked better. They went on about Afghanistan. He went pretty hard on Afghanistan. I think Trump did better on the foreign policy, but I just don't think that's enough to overtake how poorly he came across. Okay. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. We'll check maybe next week to see what the polls are doing afterwards. I imagine they'll reflect a little more favorably for Kamala. But like I said, this is a very divided place. It's not in America from a long time ago where a really large section of the population is like, I could go Democrat or Republican. It just depends who I think's better this time. Like, people are pretty much, they got their feet cemented in their party. So even these dominant performance or a non-dominant performance, or at least a clear performance on who did better, how much effect, we don't know. All right. So I don't like Kamala. I don't like Trump. I don't like very many people in Washington, D.C. But I told you I was going to give you some good news. If not good news, I was going to show you something good at the end of this podcast. And it'll come of no surprise to those of you that know me, but this is my favorite person in Washington, D.C. right now, and his name's Representative Thomas Massie, congressman out of Kentucky, and he's an American hero. I believe that. I think and if he's not, he's well on his way to being it. On a side note, he lost his wife earlier this year. If this podcast would ever reach his ears, or anyone who knows him, condolences on your wife. He seems like a truly good guy. I imagine he seems like a man who just would have had a normal family. And hell, I'd feel sorry for people that I don't like when something like that happens. But condolences to Congressman Massie on that. But he's still, whatever, after recently going through that stuff, he's still just America's greatest defender in D.C. right now. I think he carries the torch of Ron Paul, and we're going to play a clip, and I'm going to go over it a little bit. But this is Thomas Massie, and he goes in, he's a Republican, he's going in after the Democrats and Republicans on this, and he's basically talking about this omnibus bill, and he's basically talking about how the politics happen in Washington, D.C., and that he knows it and that we know it. And he just says, let's not kid ourselves. This is what's going on. So, without further ado, Thomas Massie doing what I wish more congressmen would do. This is Founding Fathers, Cincinnatus type shit.
Can we be honest with the American people about what's going on here? This is political theater. I'm going to call out both sides right here. It's all posturing, it's fake fighting. We all know where it ends up. This is Groundhog Day. I don't care if the Democrat is the speaker or Republican is the speaker. We always get a CR in September, and then we get an omnibus. Sometimes there's a twist on that. We might get the omnibus before Christmas, but if we're not good, it comes after Christmas. But that's what's going to happen. And in the meantime, it's political theater. We've got it's good theater. We've got great writers. I wish they'd just come up with a new plot. It's the same plot every fiscal year. What should we be doing? It's already been discussed. We should have done 12 separate bills. But again, whether Democrats are in control or Republicans are in control, we never do the 12 separate bills. Why do we always spend at least as much as we did last year, and why do we never cut spending? It's because Democrats want to grow the welfare state, and Republicans want to grow the military-industrial complex. And we're eventually going to get together, and they're both going to go up. I guarantee it. And both parties are just fine letting the bureaucrats.
Okay, so he's talking about spending, and he's talking about the budget, and they always spend, and it doesn't matter, left or right, Democrat or Republican. He's a Republican. In truth, he's a lousy Republican. He's a great libertarian, right? He's a lousy Republican in my mind, and I don't mean to insult the man. I'm saying this as a compliment, and I think he might not like how I define that, but I think he's a great libertarian because he plays away from these party lines. And he is good where the Republicans have their failings on the military-industrial complex and on lobbyists and just, God bless them, we need more Thomas Massies. And he tells us, we know what's going on here. You're all a bunch of actors. This is all a big show to fool the people. And he says, hey, we'll get a CR, which is a continuing resolution, I believe. And then we'll get the omnibus. And we put all these bills together and we try to agree on them. Instead of saying yes to this, no to that, you package a whole bunch of stuff so you get this and they get that and they get that and you get this. And then we go, okay, we both got what our... And it's just the ugliest form of a DC compromise. And the only time they compromise is when it's, let's run up the budget. He goes, how do we never spend? How do we never spend less than the year before? Every year. Thomas Massie knows we're $26 trillion in debt and spent lost over $1 trillion in the past, put another $1 trillion on the debt in the last, what was it I said, 7 months? He's all aware of this. He knows it. And he's pissed, rightfully, righteously angered that this is the status quo and that it's just this big game. They're just running through the motions. It's tradition at this point to destroy the dollar and to indebt the United States citizen while swearing an oath to the Constitution and claiming to represent your constituents. And to most of them, that's just fine. They go there, they swallow that pill. Maybe it hurts the first time they do it. Maybe the second time they're uncomfortable with it. And then they slip right into the game and they all do it. Thomas Massie's not them. Thomas Massie is there. He's grayer than he used to be, and I don't blame him. It must drive him nuts to be around these people and to keep so consistent in his virtues. And to see all these other people that come in and throw all their principles just out the window onto the side of the road like a cigarette butt. All right, let's keep going.
Democrats do their thing, which should be our thing, according to Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution. We are empowered with these things. Most important of the things we do is the funding, and that's the big lever we have. I've sat through now almost 2 years of hearings in this Congress where we've exposed lies at the CDC, shortcuts at the FDA, unconstitutional gun bans at the ATF, over prosecution of January 6ers at the DOJ, targeting common citizens at the FBI, spying by the NSA, illegal mandates for livestock by the USDA, targeting plant vaccine or transgenic plant vaccine at the NSF, and censorship, the censorship industrial complex of which the NSF is part of, automobile kill switch at the DOT. Now, these are all things I think most Democrats are just fine with, this kind of totalitarian state that the bureaucrats are pushing on us. But Republicans at least pretend to be against these things. But what are we going to do this September? We're going to fund every freaking one of those things that we have exposed. That is the tool that we have, is the funding. Why are we funding things we don't like? We don't have to. Well, it's because we're addicted to spending. And this doesn't do anything about the addiction at all. So let me touch on one point too here that I think is important. Is, a couple years ago, or a summer and a half ago, I suppose now, we did something where we allowed the debt limit to be increased. But as a condition of that, we said if you do a CR that lasts past April 30th, everything's going to get cut 1%. And that, to me, seemed like at least a little tinge of fiscal responsibility was creeping in. But now I notice that this CR, instead of going 1 year and giving us time to do the 12 appropriations bills, is going to go 6 months. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen because this goes 6 months. Number one, it ends in March 28th, on March 28th. Well, the automatic cuts happen on April 30th if the CR went past that. So that is exactly why the Speaker chose a 6-month CR.
All right. That might go in a little more than we need to. There's another 3 minutes of this. But what this is a man in Washington, D.C., right? Babylon. Right? A city, just the foundation are lies. And the scaffolding of all the buildings constructed there were just deceit. Nothing there is open and transparent and honest, except as far as I can tell, Thomas Massie, maybe one or two others. No one does it as good as Thomas Massie. And he says, look, we finally put on the smallest handcuff, the smallest thing, a 1% cut and spending if we don't get it in 12 months. And so then you rush and you say the CR is going to be done by, a month beforehand. Because you won't even concede that we can do this 1% cut on it. And he says, in the Democrat, he lists off so many terrible things, right? From the CDC, illegal stuff by the ATF, right? All things, libertarian talking points, I know. Then he talks about the USDA. Thomas Massie's a cattle farmer. No one knows more in Congress about how to fix farming and ranching than I believe Thomas Massie. He's got great ideas on it, and it would end up lowering prices at the grocery store despite the Federal Reserve, and it would put more money in the wallets of the farmer as opposed to these giant conglomerate meat packing plants with the giant lobbies, right? And then he goes on to talk about the transgenic plant vaccinations. Now that gets pretty much smarter than me almost right away. I'm not a science guy. They're trying to make it to where the plants that we put into our body vaccinate us from stuff. It is like they're trying to put medical procedures, involuntary medical procedures in you because, and like, how do you dose that? That seems dystopian to me. And he goes on, and he knows all these things, and it's not hyperbolic. This guy graduated from MIT. His dearly departed wife graduated from MIT. They're very smart. He's probably the smartest guy in Congress, and not just because I am biased for how much I admire this man. I think if you could put them all through the Wonderlic quarterback test, I think he scores the highest. Here he is, telling the entire Congress that he knows how the cow eats the cabbage and that he sees through it. And he didn't say it to them because they all know. They might not admit it. He's saying that for us. And you won't see this on Fox or CBS or ABC. But damn it, what could we do if we had a Congress full? What could we do if we had a Congress half full of Thomas Massies? That's when the Constitution works. That's when I don't care about politics. I would not. If our Congress was full of Thomas Massies, I wouldn't start this podcast. If someone started to talk to me about government, I'd roll my eyes and say, what the hell are you talking about? We got college football on right now. I'm going to drink my beer and bathe in the sun and play with my kids. And I would never, and I like to do all those things. I don't know about bathing in the sun. I like to get outside. I would do all those things, and I would never have to care about politics if this was our average statesman. I would never have to worry about it. I would retire my political rants happily if we could get more men like Thomas Massie, into the government. You'd ask me, are you a libertarian? Like, I don't know what that means. Instead, here I am, and I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So, thank you, Thomas Massie. Maybe we can get some clones or something. I don't know. But if you need a white pill this week, know that there's at least one son of a gun in Washington, D.C. who's looking out for you. Can we put him on the presidential debate stand? Could you imagine this guy versus Trump and Kamala? Oh, good grief. Could you imagine? That'd be a dream come true. We kind of saw that with Ron Paul in the primaries. We know the media would cut his mic or whatever, but man, that would be refreshing. Thomas Massie, 2028. All right, thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one, which will be episode 30. Bye.